What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the top 90 albums of the 90s. And we are in the top 40 now, guys, counting down numbers 40 to 31 with my good friend Nathaniel Ahart right here. So excited for this episode, man.
Yeah, and you know what? I have a feeling that this is going to be the most contentious one yet.
It's possible.
I think it's almost guaranteed. So,
Can't wait to get into it, man. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it with number 40.
Strumming my pain with his fingers.
the score by the Fugees from 1996. I got to be honest with you guys. This is crazy that this album is this low on the list. Like, good, it's in the top 50. But I would have to say, if we're talking about 90s alone, but of all time, this is one of the most influential hip hop albums ever made. And obviously, coming from Proswell, Wyclef Jean, and Miss Lauryn Hill herself, first appearance of Lauryn Hill on the list. This album from top to bottom, it's just crazy how this came to be because their first album isn't that great. Really kind of, I think it sold under like 100 copies or something. Like it really fell on flat ears. But what happened with their next album, they recorded, I believe, and it was they in what they called the Booga basement, this really small basement. I believe it was either Pras or Wyclef's uncle that it was his basement they recorded in, and they made one of the best produced hip hop albums of all time. Don't ask me why, but they did. Look, this was in my top 3 albums of the 90s. I think that this album is one of the greatest albums ever made. Just from that intro right into how many mics, just that amazing hook. How many mics do we rip on the daily? Me say, many money. Me say, many, many, many. You know, it's just so much fun. And obviously, these guys, you can just tell how much great vocal chemistry they have, all 3 of them. But really, I think Lauryn rap circles around these guys, one of the greatest rappers of all time, and which is just crazy because I think she's one of the most talented musicians in the entire industry. I mean, just one of the greatest singers of all time too, as we know from this album and obviously her solo debut. But my goodness, I mean, just so many songs on here that I started to mention with that. Of course, The Beast, which has some of the most damning political commentary I've ever heard, where it's like choking on the Star Spangled Banner or whatever he says. It's just absolutely incredible. The storytelling on these songs, so engaging. The stuff that they're talking about was, you know, kind of stuff that people were talking about in the gangster rap genre, but kind of like taken in a more I guess there was like no nonsense in this. Not there was some things that they were having a little fun, like the weird restaurant skit, which, you know, is borderline racist, but I don't know, it's still kind of funny. I'm gonna be honest with you. Um, but yeah, so many things here. Zealots, Ready or Not, obviously that amazing hook. Ready or not, here I come. You can hide. We're gonna find you. I mean, everybody knows it from the 90s. Even if you don't know the song, you know what it is. Family Business, yet again, there was another one talking about you know, the community and family all at the same time, talking about the trivia, the stuff that goes on in the lives of these communities. Just absolutely brilliant track. And of course, I mean, we just have to talk about the massive hit on here, the cover extraordinaire. Some would argue even better than the original, and I might have to agree with them. Killing Me Softly with his song. As soon as Lauryn comes in with her beautiful voice on that hook, you know what you're in for. You hear the weird sitar sample and just
And one time.
one time. I mean, just such a
Yeah.
classic. So many great songs in here. The Mask, Cowboys, and then of course their cover of No Woman No Cry, which Wyclef sings himself. I think even rivals the Bob Marley version. It's so cool how they put it, they set it in Brooklyn, you know, in the government yards in Brooklyn to kind of
Yeah.
like contemporize and I guess kind of, you know, put it at a very specific time and place. And of course they go back to Trenchtown and whatnot. But I just think the statements that they make on here were so far ahead of their time. And I just think the samples here were so musical, and I don't think anything was being done like this. The melodies that came out of these songs, like really, this was the album I think that broke alternative rap out to the mainstream. I mean, this sold gangbusters, and I think obviously paved the way for so many artists to come after in that alternative hip hop scene, like Outkast, and later, dare I say his name, Kanye West. I think that this album really revolutionized everything, and I am just, I mean, whether it be lyrical proficiency, production, and everything on the Under the Kitchen Table. I don't know why it's so low on the list. This is one of the best albums ever made.
Well, I don't have anything else to add to that, man. You summed it up for sure. But yeah, I mean, I think it's at a pretty decent spot in the upper echelon. But definitely, I wouldn't have been in my top 10 or anything like that. But I can see what you mean about it being influential as well. I wasn't sure where you were going to go with that when you said it initially, but now it kind of makes sense. I could even see it influencing stuff that was coming around the same time, like Blackstreet, like No Diggity, and things like that. A more melodic mixture of R&B and hip hop. Even though, I mean, and you could say, maybe Tribe Called Quest maybe influenced them a little bit, and then they just passed the baton, getting it more even more into that alternative realm. But yeah, you got to love Wyclef, Lauryn Hill. I mean, just incredibly talented, and great to see him on the list.
Absolutely, though this should be at least in the top 20. So I don't know, guys. I'm glad to see it in the upper half, though, I guess. So there we go.
We'll have other things to be annoyed about as we go on. I know, but
and
yeah,
we'll talk about it a little bit. All right, let's go to number 39.
Let's do it. Temple of the Dog from 1991, a super group, if you will, combining members of Soundgarden and members of Pearl Jam, honoring their fallen friend Andy Wood from the band Green River, who essentially was the band pre-Pearl Jam that had Jeff Ament and Stone Gossard. And Chris Cornell was a roommate and very close friend of Andy's. And when he passed away, he started writing these songs in tribute to him. And these guys all got together, and it was just this brotherly love fest that became such an amazing album. I mean, really some of Chris Cornell's best work in his whole career, whether it's Soundgarden, Audioslave, you name it. The opening track, Say Hello to Heaven, just incredible. You can feel it's so heartfelt how he's singing about Andy, and then vocally, like reaching heights that seem unimaginable by the end of this song. It's like even gives Robert Plant a run for his money vocally on Range. But then you've got some great rockers like Reach Down, Mike McCready from Pearl Jam, showing how great he is of a lead guitarist. Really gives him some time to shine. But I think the ballads that are the stronger of the songs on here, like Hunger Strike, which features Eddie Vedder on, I think, his first song that was ever on a record. Wow. His voice, this was his debut pre Pearl Jam. So really cool trade-off that I'm going hungry. I love it. And then Call Me a Dog, I think, is just an amazing piano-led ballad by Cornell. This by the side B of the album, I think it gets a little weaker, but the A side of this thing is just fantastic, and I'm really glad it made it this high on the list. I was expecting to see it, but a little surprised it made it this high, but I'm very glad about it.
Well, I mean, I was expecting to see it on the list, but over the score, yeah, I don't get that. I had this at the bottom of my list. I think this is a really solid album. I owe a lot of your sentiments, especially Say Hello to Heaven. I mean, Cornell's wailing like a madman on that thing. You feel the pain. I mean, it's just such an incredible performance, and one of the greatest, if not the greatest singer from the night. Well, Mariah Carey, but you got to put Cornell near the top if we're talking about all-time greatest vocalist. Of course, Hunger Strike with Eddie Vedder. I mean, what a standout track on this album. And just the way he's like, yeah, he's like screaming on the chorus. It's just absolutely incredible. I
Yeah.
really love Wooden Jesus as well. That's another standout. I absolutely love how he's like talking about how everybody carries around like these, you could say icons of Jesus. And it's like, you know, they're supposed to be a symbol of worship, but yet again they're being commoditized, you know. And
Mhm.
it's like, wow, like you never really think of it that way, but the way Cornell breaks that down, I absolutely love. This is a really I mean, this is a really solid album all the way throughout its runtime, but I think by the end it starts sounding the same, and I think it's way too long. Like Reach Down, as good as Mike McCready's guitar playing is, I mean, it's insanely impressive. I mean, did the song have to be 11 minutes long though? I
Yeah.
don't know. I just don't understand why this is above something like The Score, which is so influential. Like this is definitely deserves a spot on the list. I just don't understand why it is this high, given the things I've said. And but you know, certainly one of the better grunge albums from its era. I will give it that at the very least.
Yeah,
But
and
I
again,
don't know.
like so interesting that it preceded both Pearl Jam's 10
You're
and
right.
Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger. So it's like fans that became fans of those bands back in 91 that were hungry for more of those bands were able to go, oh, wait, this came out recently. Like a lot of people thought it came out after the fact because the video came out later and stuff after they became more popular for Hunger Strike. But yeah, maybe that's part of the lore, you know, surrounding it.
Could be. And
But
I think it's
yeah,
better than those albums. I'll say it right now. I really do. Not
wow.
by a whole lot, but well, definitely more than Bad Motorfinger,
Oh,
but
I
not
agree with you there.
not
Yeah,
much better than 10, but I still like it better. So I don't know what that tells you. Shouldn't be this high on the list though.
that'll
Glad
be
to
an
see it though.
interesting discussion when we get to that one.
We will see.
All right. Well, now at number 38.
Violator by Depeche Mode from 1990. What most fans and critics would say is their finest hour. And I'd have to agree with them. Going back to the 80s list, I did listen to Music for the Masses. Thought it was really solid. I wouldn't put it in the top 50. I think Black Celebration is even better. But I definitely have to give this album the edge because I feel like when it comes to synth pop, nobody was making work this dense and this complex. Even though it sounds like it's from the 80s a little bit, it's still so ahead of its time in so many ways. The ominous synth tones that kind of permeate this whole album are so effective, I think, right from the beginning. You know, and I just love the themes that they're getting at too, like especially
Mhm.
how they harken drug addiction and love on songs like The Sweetest Perfection and Enjoy the Silence. I mean, especially Enjoy the Silence. My
Mm.
goodness, the layering of, you know, musical things that they have going on, whether it be the synths or the guitars or what have you, it is so far ahead of its
And that
time. And then of course,
chorus is so all I ever wanted, all I ever
all I ever
needed.
needed. Yeah,
Oh,
dude,
so
so
good.
good.
Yeah.
And I think Dave Don's vocals, or how, what is it, Dave Gahan? Yeah, Dave Gahan.
Mhm.
His vocals are so good, never been better, more polished on the thing. But I haven't
Mhm.
even talked about Personal Jesus, which sounds so far ahead of its time. Just the punchy
Mhm.
drum. It sounds like you can just tell how much influence it had on electronic music going forward, and it sounds like a 2010s pop song.
Yeah,
And I
totally.
could
And
and
no
I could
wonder that Johnny Cash covered it afterwards as well.
right.
I mean,
Uh,
so cool.
and yeah, just the way how they relegate you know, having a personal Jesus, someone you can have as your savior that you can rely upon. Really cool sentiment, even though the lyrics go back and forth over and over again. It's such a great hook, it's such a great song, you gotta love it. And
Yeah.
as I was saying, when it comes to influence, even in Waiting for the Night, there's like this vocal reverb effect that sounded like it would be something from a 2010s pop song. So
Mhm.
I really think that this album, I mean, really, they were the progenitors to Daft Punk, who I think would even go on to do
Yeah.
it even better. But
Mhm.
yeah, man, I mean, and I didn't even get to mention Halo, which is my personal track. I think one of the most underrated cuts, in where they're like saying, you know, shackles on your legs like a halo, and it's just like turning
Mhm.
something so holy and illustrious into something so constrictive. I think it's absolutely brilliant. The lyrics on here so dark. I think my problem with this album, because I love about half these songs, I just think it kind of drops off in the second half. Not that there's a bad song on here. I
Yeah.
just think that, for my liking, it doesn't really hit me as much as I'd like it to, but I understand why it's this high on this list, because this probably, you could say, is one of the most influential albums from the 90s, just how it had an effect on electronic music and pop music going forward. I mean, there's nothing like it. And yeah, I think this is a really good choice. It would have been
Yeah.
on my list if I had heard it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was lower on my list, but yeah, there's kind of like you were saying, there's a bit of a timelessness to it that and I was gonna say too, with Personal Jesus, there's almost like a bluesy element to it
Yeah.
that I think, combining the futuristic synth sound of it and that it gives it this appeal that I think for any 2010s and beyond can get behind. And Enjoy the Silence, I think, is just one of the greatest songs of all time, honestly. Like the way that it ends too, with those kind of like synthy horns is so cool, like on top of the synths.
Wait, you
It
mean
just
I did the extended outro, or just
yeah, the outro is so cool. I
See,
love
for
it.
me, that's what brings it, because it would have been my favorite song if it weren't for the outro, because I feel like it just drags out a little bit.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
still a
I mean,
great song.
they take advantage of it. But yeah, honestly, I've heard the not extended version more than the extended on the album cut. But I love it either way. So but yeah, I agree. Like second half definitely falls off a bit. So it's not to me like an amazing record, but it definitely has some amazing moments. And yeah, definitely deserves to be here. So good pick, guys. So now that brings us to number 37.
Pinkerton by Weezer from 1996, the group's second album after their debut from 94. And yeah, this album is really, really good. I didn't have it this high on the list, and I'll get into the reasons why, but I'm come pretty close to loving this album. I mean, I think it's definitely one of Weezer's most consistent albums, which doesn't really take a whole lot, to be honest. But they have some great albums in their catalog. I won't lie to you. And this is certainly close to being one of them. I know some people would put this second, some people would put this first. For me, it's probably fourth in their discography. I mean, come on, No Other One. Why Bother? There's so many songs on here that really you see Rivers at his darkest lyrically and his most personal. It's almost painful to listen to, considering how pleasing and pop oriented the melodies were on their first album, and how much fun that batch of songs was. Across the Sea, yet again another beautiful ballad from Rivers. And of course, I just love the acoustic outro, Butterfly. There's so many things to love about this record, but also I think it kind of gets a little incelish, kind of what Rivers talking about. He's just saying, "Oh, I can't get woman," and he like blames them for everything. And then don't even get me started on Pink Triangle, where he's basically saying like he's trying to get this lesbian to fall in love with him, and it's just like, just give it a break, man. She likes girls, it's so ridiculous. It's like, do we really have to explain gender politics to you? Yeah, not a fan of that song. But I still think, regardless, despite my grievances thematically, you can just tell like how personal it is to Rivers, and it really gives an insight to his headspace at the time. Whether you agree with his sentiments or not, I still think it's a very compelling record. I just don't think it should be this high on the list, but I know some people it's one of their favorite albums, so hey, can't take that away from you, I guess. Well,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
probably have before, but not on this one.
Sure. No, yeah, I wouldn't have it this high either. I mean, I do love Weezer, and I feel like their discography is very inconsistent for
The
sure.
definition of
That's
that.
we could do a whole episode about that. But no, I tend to, I guess, gravitate more to their happier, positive, poppier stuff, like the Blue Album, the Green Album, and so forth. But but I do appreciate this record for what it is. And I remember at the time that it came out, I think it didn't do very well. And that's part of why they took a big break between this one and the Green album. It was like, um, I think they were kind of questioning, their longevity after this. But there is still some stuff to enjoy here, like the tracks you mentioned. I also like El Scorcho quite a bit. I think it's like interesting, different kind of them trying to do an alternative Latin vibe of a song. But yeah, Rivers Cuomo and the gang, you gotta love them, and great to see them on the list. I'm sure we may be talking about them again. We'll see. But yeah, good pick, guys. So that will now bring us to number 36. Vitalogy by Pearl Jam from 1994, their third album, and one of their most interesting for sure. I mean, they've got some of their best songs that they'd ever written on here, some of their worst songs as well. It's kind of a little all over the place, but it definitely starts out strong with Last Exit, which I think is a really cool opener. I love just how Dave Abruzzi, I always say his name wrong, starts out on the drums with that just that pumping rhythm, and some interesting kind of thoughts on life by Eddie Vedder. The whole album has sort of a theme about vitalogy is a made-up word, and if you have the album, it's kind of like a little booklet that has all this weird stuff about human life and somewhat the afterlife, which he gets on with songs like Immortality, which is another strong track. I'm just going to mention some of the strong tracks here. Not For You, I think, is one of their most just scathing rock songs, where he's just literally saying this song is not for you, and screaming at his audience in a sense. Taking a note from Cobain vocally, where when he screams on this, he almost has that's kind of tone here and there. But the ballads, I think, are some of their strongest. Nothing Man, and of course Better Man, which was a huge hit, and I still think one of their best tracks. But also I want to mention Corduroy, which I think is just fantastic, the way that it builds, and has Vedder also playing guitar more frequently on this album, and that's a one where you get the 3 guitar effect by the end of the song in a really great way. But yeah, there's some weak stuff on here as well, and I thought I'd give you the opportunity to talk about some of that.
What the fuck is this album doing this high? This is, I'll tell you something though. When I got to Tremor Christ, I was like, oh my goodness, this could be my favorite Pearl Jam album, because just the really weird, complex chord progression on that song is so just just really gets me, and so arresting, and I just love how dark it is, more than anything, lyrically and just musically speaking. I think that track is awesome. And then going into Nothing Man, which I think features some of, I think damning is a good word for it, just absolutely, I think some of Vedder's best lyrics ever, and one of his best vocal performances for sure. Absolutely love that song. And Better Man, I mean, I think those 3 songs alone, I think are better than anything off of 10. I really do. But I think when it comes down to it, this album is filled with so much filler and songs. Bugs is one of the worst songs I've ever heard. It is so stupid. It is so vapid. It is like, what the fuck are you doing putting this song in this record? An absolute embarrassment. Not as bad as Mother off of Synchronicity, but it's pretty bad with the extremely out of tune accordion and Vedder just saying nonsense. I hate that song. And then, of course, the last song here, Hey Foxy Man, I don't give a shit what it is, but it is so pretentious, so overlong, so stupid. And I just feel like, and then of course you have some really cool songs like Aye Davanita, but it's just filler. There's nothing going on. They're saying the same thing over and over again. What is the appeal of this album? Why is this ranked above The Score, for crying out loud? Why is this ranked above Violator? What the hell? Like, I really like. It's not a bad album. I think it's pretty decent, but I feel like all these tracks hold it back from being something that's really great. They kind of messed around, changed up their style. Good for them. It doesn't mean it works.
I knew you were gonna be pissed off that this one was
this should
this
not
high,
be on the list.
and it makes me happy. I don't know why, but I love it.
But this should not be on the list. I really
Well,
feel that with certainty.
shouldn't even be on the list. You're saying?
I don't think so. It's
Wow.
way too inconsistent. It's way too inconsistent. I think
Well-
if you took off songs, kind of put them together on another album, hey,
Yeah,
that
I
could
agree.
work.
I agree with you. I mean, and maybe if they had gone full White Album mode, where because there was 14 tracks on here, like kind of a regular album length. If they had gone and said, we're gonna make a double album, maybe then you could see them throwing in some more of these like throwaway tracks. Maybe if they had more, double the quality, something like that. But yeah, on a 14 track album with probably 5 of these being easily thrown off, I see what you're saying.
But
So-
John, also keep in mind the Beatles, they are not. So let's make this clear. So
Yes,
yeah,
no, not even close. But still, Pearl Jam, I'll still defend them to this day. They are one of my favorite bands of the 90s, and I put them up there in my top 20 of all time. So
Right.
I know you don't agree with that, but
no,
yeah.
but I will give you those 3 songs I mentioned. I think are awesome.
Yeah.
So,
No, and
whatever.
Nothing Man, I believe, was written by Jeff Ament, the bass player, but
Oh, right.
of course,
Okay, my bad.
Vedder, he's got the voice, but yeah, a beautiful, beautiful song, and Better Man. I mean, everybody loves it. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, we'll see what's next. So now at number 35. Verses by Pearl Jam, yet again from 1993, their second album. We're seeing a pattern here, and I'm liking it, man. I actually do like this album a bit more. I tend to like, well, I won't get into their, whole discography, but this is definitely up there. I like Yield actually is my second favorite. This would be my third favorite. And just from the opener of Go, the 1-2 punch of Go and Animal, just these short, sweet, but very rocking songs starting off the album. It's like they're getting straight to business. And then you've got Daughter, which, some would say is a little bit of like a sequel to Jeremy, sort of, but in a good way. I think the storytelling on here is great. I love the acoustic opening, and they're talking about real issues, and they do so actually, they were some of the first rockers to be bringing up issues of guns, issues with guns on songs like Glorified G, of songs like WMA, which stands for White Male American, talking about white privilege and specifically police officers. They're talking about some really heavy stuff on this record, and stylistically, I mean, they're at their most rocking on songs like Blood and Rearview Mirror. But then you've got the balance of beautiful ballads like Elderly Woman, Behind the Counter in a Small Town, which is one of my all-time Pearl Jam faves. There's really, to me, not a weak track on this record. I think it ends beautifully with Indifference. And, I could mention every song, but I'll leave that off. But I know that you probably, I know you're just not that big a Pearl Jam guy. And this is sort of, this episode is what last episode was to me with Bjork, I suppose. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay.
You
Is that so? That's
gotta
all you
be-
got to say?
I have a little bit more to say. You gotta be fucking kidding me. What? I mean, not to discredit anything you say because you make valid points, but this album, why above Vitology even? I don't understand. Look, I will say Animal, I love that song. I don't know, something, because I'm not even necessarily the biggest fan of Eddie Vedder's voice, but something about him screaming on that track is so primal. Awesome. The rest of it, look, I think one of my biggest problems with Pearl Jam, and I've never understood their appeal in this way, I think their melodies sometimes are really, really awkward. And I do think Jeremy is a fairly great song. And so it's interesting you mentioned Daughter, because I feel like yet again it has my problem with Jeremy is the melody feels very awkward, and that's the thing. I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't sound right to me. And then Vedder, he's going like that, probably not the best Vedder impression, but I feel like a lot of this album I can't understand a single word that he's saying throughout the entire thing. Even if he does bring up those issues, I feel like it just gets lost in the mix. One thing I will give this album, and I will give it the benefit of doubt in the sense, I did listen to this, I was very hopped up on carbs, but usually I go back, I don't think it would have made a difference. I really don't, because I couldn't understand anything that was going on in this album. It just kind of sounded the same after a certain point, kind of teetered off in a monotony. 46 minutes could have been like 38. I don't know. I just think that this album, it's so overrated. I don't understand the appeal of it. Nothing really stands out at all. So, sometimes I don't even know, like, as you said, they are talking about stuff, but to me, it doesn't sound like it. And I just, like, why above, like, The Score or any of these albums you mentioned are so influential? I don't know why this one lands so high. It's not a bad record, even though I walked out of the room. It's not bad. I really don't even dislike it. It's a very low 6 for me, which is, close to me not liking it. I just don't get the appeal of this album, and I certainly don't think that this one, if we're talking about Pearl Jam, influence-wise, should even be this high on the list. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And 2 in a row, I just don't know if I can do
it. I thought you legitimately quit the whole thing when you walked out. I was like,
I'm here.
I guess
I'm here.
Fantastic. Guys, all I could say is great pick. So now at number 34. Ill Communication by the Beastie Boys from 1994. The Beastie Boys here again in the 90s. We talked about them a bit in the 80s. And this, to me, personally, is their strongest record. I know it's 20 tracks long and it has quite a few instrumentals on there, but quite honestly, some of those instrumentals are my favorites on here. Like Ricky's theme has such a cool groove. Transitions is very cool. And, as always, they're playing their own instruments and doing it very well. And they give it almost like this kind of 70s throwback to some of the sounds on here. And as well on the main tracks, like Sure Shot, the opener, which has some of their best rhymes on any of their songs, and it's got this recurring flute loop. There's also a song later in the album called Flute Loop where they use a different flute on that one, but also giving it this kind of throwback vibe. But of course, the song that everybody knows and loves from this record is Sabotage, which is just like the Beasties taking punk rock to another level. And of course, the great music video directed by Spike Jonze, where they're, these cops and robbers chasing each other around town. It is so awesome and fits the song perfectly. But yeah, there's all kinds of great stuff. Sabrosa, another instrumental that gives almost this kind of Latin vibe going on. You've got Root Down, a really great jam. And then Q-Tip even shows up on this album. Yet another album Q-Tip is on Get It Together, which isn't one of the strongest tracks to me, but it's decent. But yeah, I mean, there's some songs that probably could have been cut off of this overall, but I think it's again their best outing, and glad to see it on the list.
Well, I'd have to disagree with you there because I feel like what they did on Paul's Boutique was so ahead of its time, in fact, that, there aren't many hip hop albums that even come close to that amount of eclectic sampling and doing it well. This is the thing. Yet again, I think this album, it's good. It's overrated though. And I think a lot of it has to do with how much filler's on it. Cause look, I appreciate what they're doing. Really, as you said, with those sounds, really taking it back and kind of like throwing all these, influences together. But I think it is bogged down by its runtime. I do not know why in the hell it is 59 minutes long. But I appreciate some of the stuff that they're doing on here for sure, especially Sabotage, as you said, an all-time Beasties classic. Can't knock that, but I don't get it. I don't think there's some things on there that seem like they're going towards their most substantive release, and then there's stuff that kind of refute that. I don't know. It's really interesting what they're doing stylistically, but I feel like this one is so inconsistent that I like, yet again, I'm just hung up why certain albums are ranked above others in this list, especially if we're talking, because we're trying, and maybe I'm a little off base, I don't know, but I certainly wouldn't, yet again, I'm going to say again, I certainly don't know why this is above the score, because it's certainly not more influential than that. And I think that the Beasties have perfected this beforehand. It's like cool. Like, I do like this better than License to Ill. I will put that out there. It is a stronger record than that, but because stylistically what they're doing, I sound like a broken record at this point. But regardless, what I'm trying to say is I think that this is too high on the list, and yeah, good album though.
Yeah. I'm pleased so far, but
you're
I know
happy.
we'll get to one that I'll be displeased on before too long. So with that being said, let's go to number 33.
The Chronic by none other than Dr. Dre from 1992. Look, this is an album I admit I have to come back to because I listened to it before I really got into hip hop. Just because it was honestly, it was similarly ranked on the Rolling Stillness of All Time, not just of the 90s. So it's interesting that it lands here on this list. And I think maybe I know why, and I'll get into that. But look, whether you agree with it or not, this is one of the most influential albums of all time. So I'm not going to argue its placement on this list, I don't think. Just the production coming from Dr. Dre, he really kicked things up another level. And whether you agree with the sentiments on this record or not, really kind of showed where hip hop was going in the years to come. Of course, with classics like Nothing But a G Thing, that smooth production that permeates this whole record. And of course, Snoop Dogg coming on, or Snoop Doggy Dogg at the time, just one of the coolest MCs, one of the smoothest, one of the slyest, coming on the mic with Dr. Dre himself. Such a great combo that, still unmatched to this day. I think really when he's getting into issues of police brutality and racial violence, I think that is where the album really excels. But I also have to mention the skits on here, which are absolutely hysterical. I've got to say it right up front. But I think one of my problems with this album, I'm going to tell you right now. I mean, the last track says it all. Bitches ain't shit. I feel like a lot of this album's just about, oh, we're going to, smoke some weed, we're going to do some drugs, we're going to, get these bitches, and I feel like it leaves a little less substance than to be desired. But yet again, I feel like at the time too, I was thinking the loops in hip hop were a bit repetitive. I feel like if I came back to it now, I would appreciate it more. But I don't know. I think some of these songs, as well produced as they are, a bit lyrically vapid. So maybe it's a bit overrated in that sense, but I can't take away anything that this album has done for hip hop, and I really do want to come back to it. It didn't make my list, albeit much lower down, but yeah, it is a good choice, and it absolutely deserves a spot on here nonetheless.
Yeah, definitely. And I certainly hear why you're saying it's influential. I mean, even I remember at the time, like there was nothing quite like that. I don't know if you would call it a synth or whatever it is on Nothing But a G Thing, that where the year after, I think Ice Cube was using the same sound on some of his songs, which is very interesting on Lethal Injection, but I just want to mention I'm sad to say that Ice Cube did not make the list. Whether Lethal Injection, Predator, I would have loved to see at least one album of his
America's
on
Most
this list.
Wanted.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that being said, it is good to see another member of NWA on here, and Dr. Dre, great as a producer and as an MC on here. I see what you mean about it being vapid, but there are some hilarious moments as well,
Oh yeah.
like D's nuts and stuff like that. And of course, you mentioned the great Snoop Dogg, who's technically on the list twice now. So good for him, man. But yeah, it's a classic. I haven't listened to it recently, but yeah, it's definitely deserves its place on the list, and I wouldn't really argue its placement either. So yeah, great pick, guys. So that is now going to bring us to number 32. Dirt by Alice in Chains from 1992, their big breakthrough record, their second album after Facelift, and the one that I still think to this day, aside from their MTV Unplugged record, which is incredible, as far as studio albums goes, I think this is their best. Them Bones right out of the gate with such a cool guitar riff by Jerry Cantrell, and of course the great vocals by Lane Staley throughout this album are just incredible. One of the greatest of the grunge singers. And then, continuing on with Damn That River, just some of their greatest hits on here, Down in a Hole, Rooster. You've got Angry Chair, which is a really cool song as well, kind of really dark. I mean, the whole album is extremely dark. You've even got a song called Godsmack, which I guess influenced the name of that band.
They say no though, from what I hear. So.
Yeah, I've heard that too. But
yeah.
the last track on this album, I think, is the standout. Wood is just an incredible 3.5 minute song that starts with this awesome bass riff and ends with just that amazing chorus, that Into the Flood Again, and ends with that If I Would Could You. Oh my God, I just love it. One of my favorite songs but it's definitely my favorite Alice in Chains song. And yeah, I mean, it may be a little inconsistent in places, but definitely deserves to make the list, and not at a bad spot here.
Well, okay, I'll say this. I think, as you said, starting off with Them Bones immediately captured my attention. Really, I think that this is the closest any grunge band has ever come to sounding like Black Sabbath, and that's awesome. I think you can really feel how dark and metallic this album is, more than any of their contemporaries. And of course, I mean, Rain When I Die. Oh my goodness, what an amazing track, and Lane Staley's vocals on that. You could just feel where it's coming, that place of pain, which apparently it did rain when he died, which
wow.
It was in Seattle. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it makes sense because of geographical location, but still tragic nonetheless. Of course, Down in a Hole is another one I absolutely love. The hook is just so strong on that, and just yet again, just how this whole album is really a concept album about drug addiction and just loss in general, and really kind of like, I guess, the unfulfillment of life, and really very dark places that Cantrell and Staley were going lyrically, but I absolutely love the harmonies on this thing. Like, there were no other grunge bands that had harmonies quite like these guys.
Yeah.
The title track is another absolute standout to me, maybe my favorite, I don't know. But just when Lane Staley is like saying, "You scrape me off of the walls," like, oh, like just the idea of the suicide and leaving behind that mess, and it's just, oh, it's so disturbing, but it's so effective. And I love Cantrell's guitar tones on this album, absolutely blow my mind. Like on Rain When I Die, absolutely amazing. It's interesting you say what is the standout, because to be honest, my biggest problem with this album, I feel, really falls off by the end. And you know, not that there's any bad songs, but the hooks just feel a bit repetitive, feel a bit weak, feel a bit undercooked. I'm not saying this album doesn't deserve to be on the list, because it is quite good and is quite consistent throughout. I wouldn't say there's really a bad song or anything. But I think for what they did, they were pretty definitive. But I don't know. I just feel like this album's too inconsistent for its own good, I suppose. But you know, I can certainly see why a lot of people love this. So I'm not really upset it's this high. I'm just questioning it a little bit.
Mm.
Once again, I will say score is more influential. Let me just make that clear if I haven't already. But you know, like, I can see why a lot of people would dig this one.
Yeah, a lot of grunge on this episode. I just took note of,
That is true.
but yeah, and it's, you know, these guys technically, Facelift came out in '90 before
Mhm.
a lot of the other Seattle guys did.
That is true.
So
They
so
kicked it
they
off.
exactly, and they don't always get credit for that, but yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the harmonies as well, because as you said, there's not many other the way they do their harmonies with those kind of, you know, minor tones, no one else sounds like it, especially on Rooster when they're doing those falsettos and stuff. It's so cool. But yeah, great to see him this high on the list, and you know, Alice in Chains up there in some way on this list. So great pick, guys. So now at number 31.
Hi, my name is what? My name is my name is
The Slim Shady LP by Eminem from 1999. Yeah, obviously a lot of people voted it this high on the list, and I'd have to agree. This is actually in my top 20. I think that this is quite not his debut album, which is kind of lost to time, but really his major label debut. Dr. Dre once again bringing him into his fold. And I mean, I don't think Dr. Dre just endorses anybody. Let's make that very clear, especially a white rapper, because really I don't think there were many white rappers at the time, and this really broke him to the forefront because he was doing something so different from everybody else. Just this really shock horror type of vibe that he was giving off right from the beginning, from the "my name is" the "hi, my name is who, my name is what, my name is what the Slim Shady," you know. Everybody knows this song whether they like it or not, and just really sets off this persona of Slim Shady that he continued through all his records. Such a great song, so much fun. I will say though, I is as good as the story, because let me say the storytelling I think is really where Eminem excels. I mean, one of the best lyrical rappers of all time. I mean, there's no question he's at the top when you're talking about the best MCs in the game. Just his flow and everything, which obviously got better on other records. But I will say, Guilty Conscience with Dr. Dre featured on it doesn't really sit entirely well with me, considering how they kind of pass off Dr. Dre's domestic charges, like "ha ha ha, you beat that woman," because as we know that it ended up being true. So not the best look, I don't think. But regardless, I mean, when it comes to Brain Damage, Paul, 97 Bonnie and Clyde is one of the darkest songs and one of the darkest personas that Eminem has ever done with the Slim Shady persona. Really, the storytelling so brutal about this guy killing his girlfriend so he can have time with his daughter, and having his daughter innocently help him in the process. I mean, it is so disturbing, but yet again, I think his storytelling and his lyricism just completely arrest me listening to the song. It is unbelievable and so disturbing in so many ways. Role Model, though, might be my favorite. Some of the best wordplay on here, and really Eminem talking about on this album too, like the stuff that he went through as a kid, you know, being bullied and such, and how he deals with it in such this, you know, kind of fetishized, grotesque way. Pretty disgusting, but I think you can tell that it is all satire. And then, of course, you have the Ken Kniff skit, where it's like this predatory gay man. It's like so bizarre, but just, yeah, you sexy ass. Like the way he talks, I can't help it. It is so funny. I just think it's hysterical. But yet again, I mean, so many great moments of storytelling. My Fault, you know, talking about a bad trip gone wrong. So I Just Don't Give a Fuck is obviously one of the highlights for many people. Yeah, and I could see, I think this album's pretty consistent personally. But by the end, it does sound, pretty similar. So I don't as consistent. I think it is. I don't prefer this to his other two albums that came out later. But personally, I'm really glad this made the list. So yeah, good choice.
Okay, well, first of all, this is way too high on the list.
No.
I'll say this about Eminem.
Yes.
I do think he's a very talented rapper. I do think he did get better as time went on, but for this album specifically, like his voice is just so whiny and annoying to me. That's one thing. Then his sense of humor is, I feel, is so mean throughout the album.
Yeah.
And I realize that, he's playing a persona,
That's the
or
point.
or
Yeah.
perhaps hiding behind the persona, however you want to put it. But yeah, I just didn't enjoy that aspect of it. And sadly enough, even though it's produced by Dr. Dre, I feel like most of the music is almost as annoying as his vocals. Like this sort of weird carnival harpsichord sound that gets on my nerves. Not on all the songs, but like actually, I do like the sample they use on "My Name Is," which I forget what song that is. It's an old '70s tune. That's really cool. But the only song that I really enjoyed on here was "Role Models." Like I
Yeah.
enjoy
Great.
his sarcasm on that, and what he's trying to say, like essentially "Don't be like me," which I think is a good message.
A
So
lot of people didn't pick up on that either, which is crazy, but
yeah,
that's a whole other story.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I guess, when it comes down to it, it's more of a personal thing than necessarily like,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I don't hate it. I definitely don't see why it's this high on the list. And I
Yeah.
don't think it's more, better or more innovative than some of the other hip hop albums that we've talked about for sure.
Sure.
In
Yeah.
this very episode, as a matter of fact. So, yeah, I'm just, I'm not going to walk out of the room, but I am, uh, discouraged that this is the highest on the list on this episode.
Score's better, yes. I what I will say about this album, I think lyrically it is a little light, despite songs like I say light in the sense where I feel like he could have gone a little bit deeper. And I think that's rectified on his next two albums, 100%, which is why I probably don't rank it as high. And as you said, the music, it does get a little, similar. So I get that at the very least. But for me personally, this definitely I think is one of the standout hip hop, because it's so different from everything else going on. And that is the thing. It is a persona. So whether you buy into that or not is up to you. But
It's
I certainly
it's
do.
certainly no Vanilla Ice, that's for sure.
Well,
So
there you go.
exactly. So all right, well, that was an interesting episode, guys.
Yeah.
I think from here it's got to be moving up, I would hope.
Yeah.
I think for the most part I like everything that's coming next. So
Yeah, me too.
so yeah, but yeah, so far, guys, great picks. Maybe we don't always agree on the order, but or we may not even agree that something should be on the list at all. But hey, that's what it's all about, guys. So thank you again, and please be sure to subscribe to Nathaniel's channel so you can obviously see next week's episode and so much more great content. And be sure to get your votes in too for his movies countdown that's going to be coming up. And yeah, be sure to subscribe to Johnny Radio too, where we're always discovering and rediscovering great music, baby. So thank you, guys, and can't wait to see you next week.
All right. Have a good one.
Peace.
Goodbye.